I said earlier that when I was a small child that I learned to see God in everything and pray about everything. There were so many incidences that happened in my life that made that a reality. I remember one day as a small child, I don't even remember how old I was because I know that I had to be over 5 because the first 5 years of my life we lived across the creek in East Texas. A creek is a small stream, and we moved across and we moved in front of the little Pentecostal church. We lived right across from the church where I attended my early years of my life. And I remember on this particular Sunday, I went to church, and for some reason, my mother had not felt that well that morning, and she had not gone to church. But as we were in church, my aunt, my mother's sister, actually in East Texas, we would say my aunt. But an ant is something that crawls on the ground, and I know that you're really supposed to say your aunt. So my aunt got sick that morning in church and actually died. And I remember they laid her on the altar. We had an old, simple altar. It was so important because you carried everything to the altar in that church. You prayed about everything, and you knew that God would hear. That day they laid her on the altar. She was dead. And my mother, who had not gone to church, they rushed across the street, got her. I remember that morning to pray. And she came in to pray with them. They were praying for God to undertake. And she came to the church even though she was not dressed for church that morning. She came in, and I remember them praying. And I don't remember the sequence of everything that happened, but I do know this, that when it was all over, my aunt arose, left the church well, lived for another 50 or 60 years, and so then died on her birthday many years later because God answered prayer. And those were the kind of things that impacted my life because I knew there was nothing too big for God to answer. But if we believed God and asked Him, we could ask anything in His name and it would be done. And I learned that so many times over. That's a wonderful thing to know, that God answers prayer.